I got it. God damn, I got it. The wire harness ripped it right out by the lungs, man. We're talking today about having to try to not have this burn up, right? The wire harness. This is the engine electrical system. You can see this is the fuse box. This is where it goes through the firewall, and this is the back side. And something plugs into here. Well, let's talk about that, because in the 70s, there were a lot of things done in GM's electrical systems, and they got better. One of the things, they got rid of this glass fuse box because you had a lot of resistance up in here. And then they worked really, really hard to get rid of the terminal connections and all these connectors and things, because you get corrosion and all this stuff. And one of the problems was the alternator, okay? And this is called the alternator wire. And what it runs, see, this is a harness that's all still taped together. This is one we took the tape off. In your cluster with your fuel, oil, and temp, there's a light in here that when you turn the key on, the light comes on and says alt. Okay? Well, it's powered by this wire right here. Okay? And this is called the alternator light circuit that you've heard about for 10 years and all this. So what's going on here? When the alternator is not making any voltage, not charging your battery, the engine's not running, because the engine has to be running to spool up the alternator for the alternator to create power, right? Okay. So you turn the key on, light comes on. What's that mean? Well, one, it means the engine's not running, because it means you're not charging, all right? As soon as you fire that thing up, the light goes out. What does that mean? Well, that means you're charging. So that means on, off. Charge, not charge. Well, in the early days of alternators, it was on, off, because generators had that big regulator sitting there. And when the engine is just sitting there at idle, it's not charging. The minute you start to rev it up a little, whoop, the regulator kicks in the generator, and it's charging. This is the reason that Grandma has to get her car recharged every 3 weeks, because she didn't drive it enough out of idle. Well, they fixed that. But the problem is, the first series of alternators, which we have in our GMC, was on-off. On-off. And we say, well, we want it to be on. Okay, well, let's fool it into thinking it needs to be on all the time. So what we did is we put the regulator from the generator inside the alternator, and then we fed it a voltage that says, well, I'm low, you need to come on. Poof, it comes on, right? And how did they do that? In other words, if the alternator saw 12.65 volts, a fully charged battery, it's not going to turn on. The regulator says everybody's happy. What you need to do is to feed that regulator a voltage that's just a little bit under what the voltage is of the battery. Well, how do you do that? You add resistance to the wire. All right? Now, this wire, this connector right here, goes to this. One wire feeds the light. The other wire through the connector and gets power on the other side. And you say, well, that means just get power on one side coming from here and the power from the other side going to here. It means the light's not going to come on. Positive, positive, got nothing. Well, when you turn the key on, one side has power. So the light has power on one side, but the other side that's coming off this alternator does not, because it's a resistance, so the light comes on. So you got negative and positive. As soon as the alternator spools up, this wire goes positive, this is positive, no light. See what I mean? So that's what it's all about. Well, how does that wire say, I'm lower than the battery? It has resistance in it. And if you go inside your dash and you find this wire right here, this is a single nichrome wire. If I had some cutters, I'd cut it open. But there's a single solid steel wire, and you can see how long it is compared to all the other wires. So it's about 38 inches. And the distance of a solid steel wire will determine how much resistance it has. And the more resistance, the lower the voltage. So they determined that at 38 inches of wire, single wire, will tell that regulator to turn on. Oh yeah, works. The problem with that is, one, if the alternator's on or off and you put a dead battery on it and you get it to spool up and run, it's telling that alternator to give me 100 amps and it's only turning it idle. It won't give it 100 amps. So what does it do? It heats up and it melts. The alternators melt. Well, what else? This 38-inch piece of wire right here, it melts. It gets hot. And guess where it is? Right here. There it is right there. And if you think about your dash, this is about where the radio is. Here's your gauge, and here's the radio. So this wire is wadded up like that, right there. So what happens? The alternator is sitting there saying, I want to create all that power. And this wire gets hot because of it. And what does it do? It melts into the harness. It melts all these wires together. Had a guy one time was at Fort Wilderness. Called me 8 o'clock in the morning. He says, 2 o'clock in the morning, the horn started beeping. I'm in Fort Wilderness, the horn's beeping. People are going crazy. I ended up having to cut the wire on the horn. What happened? His harness melted, and as the green wire, one of these 4 green wires right here goes to the horn, it shorted out. It beeped his horn. He had ghosts in the machine. When you have a ghost in the machine, there's heat in here. These wires have melted into the other wires, and boom, there you go. What's that smoke coming out of the vent? What is the vent close to the radio? Here's your sign. Right there is this harness. You say, well, why did they do this? Well, they never thought about a car with 3 batteries in it. They're all dead. Who does that? If this circuit had 1 battery and the battery was a good battery, nothing wrong with this at all. But here we are. We had that motorhome sit out back for 2 months, jump it off and we'll let it sit there 30 minutes and charge up. That alternator's going, you're killing me. Don't do this. No, don't push the button. Ah! Everything melts. This wire. Good friend of mine, Gene Tucker, he passed away now, but he had a place called Corvette Classics in Macon, Georgia. And if you wanted a Concord, he even took prototype Corvettes that were crashed and rebuilt them. This guy was bad. We're talking about this one day, and he says, that's why all those 454 Corvette wire harnesses are melted. It's that wire. One of the big problems on the Corvette 454s, it got so daggum hot in there that the wire harnesses melted. And he would go in there, and the only wire that was still intact was a single strand wire. You go, what the heck was that? It was the nichrome wire. It'll get hot as crap, but it won't burn up. That's the whole idea of using that steel nichrome type wire. It'll get hot. It's designed to get a little warm, and it gets real hot. And it melts Corvettes, and it melts GMCs. So, this is the #1 problem in this big pile right here for us. Now you say, well, how do we fix this? 1, You need, there's a video I did about the one-wire alternator. You need to get rid of the use. Now see, I've lost it now. It fell in the pile. You need to get rid of the use of that that brown single-strand nichrome wire. You need to not use that anymore. Don't use that circuit at all. You want to go to an alternator that has all that stuff built in it. It's called a one-wire alternator. Now, one of the things about a one-wire alternator, it doesn't have a light anymore. Because remember, it's variable, right? So you won't be able to use the light circuit. You can put a piece of tape over it to turn it off. You never have to look at it. But what you do on that is you use a voltmeter, because a voltmeter is variable. Well, your alternator out could be variable. So you want to have a voltmeter, okay? Now on mine, I've got a voltmeter. I put a one-wire alternator in there, fire it up. It's not moving anywhere. Rev it one time, boom, comes up. That's exactly the way a one-wire alternator works. What's a one-wire alternator? It has the regulator built into the alternator, which all GMs do, but it also has the trigger circuit built in. It has this, the equivalent of the nichrome wire. So now, how did GM fix that? Real simple. This nichrome wire resistance they determined they needed to turn on that regulator was 10 ohms. Okay? If you change the nichrome wire resistance, here it is, to 100 ohms, it changes the regulator reaction to, rather than just being off, on, it goes off about 7 to 10 amps. And then as you rev the alternator up, its ability to output goes up. That's why we don't use this. We have a variable. Think of it going from analog to digital, okay? So you fix this, not by, what we used to do is to get rid of this and put in a 100 ohm ceramic resistor. A lot of you guys have done that over the years, the alternator light circuit, right? So what we did back then, it was before I knew about one-wire alternators. I replaced this 10 ohm with 100 ohm. And what did it do? It made it like the Style 2 Delco alternators that had variable. But take the one step further, let's just get rid of this whole circuit completely. Just dump it, baby out with the bathwater, get the one wire and be done completely with it, okay? Another problem I said were corrosion. Right in there, in the back side of the fuse box, every one of those connectors, that's an unsoldered connection, and there could be corrosion in there and causing problems. Also, you have problems where you have wires together, they warm each other up. Now, if you have digital wires together, you'll have what's called RF interference, where it'll go back and forth. We don't have as much RF interference. We don't have any problems with motor noise and radio and things. I think it's because our ground plane is so big that it absorbs any noise. I've never had any noise issues in radios or anything. But if you have wires together like this, you got to make sure there's no wires that get hot, like the alternator light wire, because all these wires will be susceptible to a problem. All right, so hope this is helpful. We've talked about this alternator light circuit thing, and it made it sound like it was some big special thing, but here, let me show you something. Okay, here's the connector. Now, they put a little tiny diode in this plug, this connector. It's a diode, got tape wrapped around it. Go back there and see. That's to knock off the light being dim like 73s all the time. They put that in there for that. You say, well, this is a resistor wire. It's 38 inches, is 10 ohms. Where is the resistor in it? It's a skinny wire that gets hot when too much current goes through it. That's all it is. It's a single wire that gets hot when too much current. How much current goes through it? About 3 amps. 3 amps. You want that in there? Negative, Space Ranger. You don't want this in there. You don't want to drop resistance by a wire heating up because it's holding current. You don't want that. All right. So that's it. I hope this helps. Ranch hands, write this down. Whenever you see somebody having smoke out of their vents, or the horn beeps, or you have ghosts in the machine, pull out the back of the dash, look at the harness right behind the radio, and look for any damage. Look for any heat. Look for anything in here that says that that wire got too hot and could melt to something else. It's right there, brother. All right. Thanks again. If you like what we're doing, hit like on YouTube or subscribe. Please help us with that. If you really believe this is something for you, brother, become a ranch hand. It's a good thing. And today, I know I've said a lot about it, but today I'm sending out the patterns for you guys for the sidewalls. Got all this stuff. You are not going to believe how expensive envelopes are. It's like $30 for 200 envelopes. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, I went to the store to get them. I only brought 20. So anyway, I got some envelopes. Going to send some stuff out to you. I appreciate your support. I appreciate you looking and wanting to know more things. Give us some comments, and we'll see you next time.